Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. At AM 630. WMAL.
637 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson with you. We are pleased to be joined by Tom Bevan, executive editor, RealClearPolitics.com. Also has a new eBook out, A Time for Choosing, which you can get on RealClearPolitics.com or also on Amazon. And, Tom, first of all, the Real Clear average poll that was out yesterday for the Wisconsin recall election had Walker with a lead of 6.7, and I believe the final results show Walker with a win of 6.9.
That's not bad.
So that's pretty close. That's pretty good job out of you guys.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things. I mean, the average has been historically, we're sort of the inventors, originators of the poll average. And they've been a really useful tool. I mean, they've been very accurate over time. And you go back and look in House races and Senate races and at the presidential level, and even when you've got a decent amount of data out there, typically the polls are pretty good. There's only been one instance in the 12 years that we've been doing this where the polls have just been completely off, and that was New Hampshire in 2008 with Obama and Clinton. And part of the reason for that is they didn't poll in the final 24 hours, so they didn't catch that real shift to Clinton. So, but we did have two polls come out on Monday showing Walker. I mean, they were sort of varied. One was showed a tight race, Walker +3, and the other one showed a sort of a Walker blowout +12. And of course, you take the average of that, it's about 7.5 points.
That's right.
So the average proves its worth once again.
All right. So what do you look at? I mean, was this similar to 2010? Was there anything that really stuck at you that was different this time around than the previous election in 2010?
Not really. I mean, you're just digging through the numbers. I mean, despite the tens of millions of dollars that were spent, this was almost an exact replay of 2010. I mean, Walker won all the same groups that he won. He lost union households. He won men big, but lost women by about the same margin. Mm-hmm. So, in many respects, the only thing that was different was voter turnout was higher this time. It was between 2010 and the 2008 levels. So more people turned out, but they turned out in almost the exact proportion that they did 2 years ago. And so, all of the gnashing of teeth and the money spent really just produced almost a carbon copy of what happened in 2010. And, of course, that is not good news, certainly not good news for unions, but it's certainly also not very good news for the president, in terms of November.
All right, so we've talked about Walker. We've talked about the lieutenant governor. She also was reelected or survived the recall. But there were some Republican senators who were up for recall, and there were 4 of them. And I think 3 of them survived the recall. 1 did not. And doesn't that mean that the Senate now falls into the control of Democrats through the end, at least of the end of this year?
That's true. It would be 17-16 for the Democrats. Now, that race, though, Brian, is only separated by 779 votes out of over 70,000 cast. So we're talking about a recount in that Senate race. But if that holds up, yes, the Democrats would maintain or would take control of the Senate by a single vote.
How difficult can the Democratic Senate make it on the Republican governor?
Well, they can certainly they can make it. It's when you've only got a 1 vote margin, it's not a terribly easy majority to manage. They can't afford to lose anyone. But again, the way that the state has been so divided, I would expect Democrats would be pretty darn unified there. So they could probably make life fairly miserable for Walker, of course, depending on what he tries to do.
All right, let's get into some of the Democratic talking points this morning. You said it was a bad night for President Obama. They say, well, no, it wasn't a bad night because the exit polls showed that actually, even though Scott Walker won, Barack Obama also won with voters because they would have gone 51-44 in favor of President Obama.
I find this curious because those exit polls also showed the race a 50-50 race, and that turned out to be way off. So I'm not sure that the Democrats want to be touting these exit poll numbers showing that Obama had 53% of the vote. If those numbers are off as badly as the original exit poll numbers were off, then you're looking at a 4-point. Obama with a 4-point lead in Wisconsin in a state that he won by 14 points in 2008. So, again, I'll wait and do some more of my own sort of investigation as to how badly this night was, but it clearly was not a good night for the president.
But
people who are trying to spin it as a good night for the president, I think, are stretching it quite a bit.
Isn't it true that polling data generally are not very reliable as a whole?
Exit polling?
Exit polling.
The exit polls have been terrible.
Yeah,
they've always been at least in the last few cycles. And of course, there was a big scandal about this in 2000, 2004. They went back and redid the whole VNS model and all that stuff. But even the exit polls that we've seen recently have been way off the mark. So yeah, I these days I don't. When the exit polls come out, I usually discount them almost entirely because what we've seen with the primaries and whatnot is they are not very reliable. They are not reliable data.
All right. The other two things I heard from Democrats last night were that, first of all, the candidate, Mayor Tom Barrett, just wasn't a good candidate and should never have been the guy in the first place, and that played a role in it. And the other thing is that Republicans were able to outspend Democrats in a huge amount.
Yeah, I mean, that is the one talking point that you do hear is, this was a Walker bought this election, bought the state. This is the death of democracy. It shows
right.
the spending levels in a post Citizens United world, and this is what's going to happen. I mean, I find that also to be kind of specious. I mean, Democrats spent a lot of money. Outside groups spending a lot of money, probably more money than being reported.
Tens of millions of dollars most likely spent by big labor in this election.